Welcome back to the Leadership Forum, a space where corporate leaders share insightful takes on the human side of ingenuity. I'm Saquib Vali, explorer. Say hi to the future. The leader with us today is Esther Benzie, a senior marketing executive who, beyond all else, is known for building and leading most inspired marketing teams. She's curious, especially in what drives consumers, how they think, their habits and practices, their purchase intent, and the insights from those intersections that shape products, innovations, brands, and campaigns. Welcome, Esther, and thank you for taking time out from your incessantly curious schedule.
Oh, well, thank you, Saquib. It's great to be here. Saquib, as you know, I spent more than 20 years in CPG at Procter and Gamble, and there I worked across all different categories from beauty, pharma, food, household products. And I did all different types of marketing as well. Even though I stayed here in Canada, I ran businesses, I worked with retailers and shopper marketing, I led marketing communications, insights, data, and analytics. And so I felt like I got as much as I could out of marketing here at P&G Canada. And then I spent 5 years at CIBC, where I worked on the global CIBC brand, as well as working across various lines of business from credit cards to private wealth. I left there, and what I'm calling my rewirement, I've most recently been consulting, and I'm just wrapping up 6 months at the Association of Canadian Advertisers, where I was acting as president and CEO. So, you mentioned I do love all aspects of marketing. I love growing and developing marketing talent, and I also have a very special interest in media, having led two of Canada's biggest media budgets. So that's just a little about me, a lot of which I know you know, but more for your listeners.
For
So
sure.
yeah, so onto your question on how marketing has changed. I think about this in a couple of different ways. First of all, I think about what hasn't changed since we started, and what hasn't changed is the importance of understanding the business challenge and the landscape around you. The importance of getting to know the consumer and the target you want to reach, and really understanding that you have to have a clear brand benefit that meets a consumer need. So none of that has changed in the time that I've been a marketer. But what has changed is how you reach the consumer. It's far more complicated today. And it's no longer just a 30-second TV spot. There's, so many different channels, more opportunities for personalization, new types of influencers. So all that has really changed. And I'm sure you found that as well. I think the other thing that's changed is the marketing team itself. Like now, there's all sorts of specialists versus generalists. And when we started, there was a lot more, you ran the business on all aspects of it. And now you might have a social media specialist or a hands-on keyboard marketing media specialist, and there aren't as many generalists.
Got that, and I think that's absolutely true. I love the fact what you're saying is what hasn't changed and what has. Would be great to just get your perspective before we launch into something else. Is that friction? Is that something that people are trying to get used to? Just your broad perspective, because I think that'd be extremely helpful, especially with the Association of Canadian Advertisers. Like, I mean, I'm sure you're dealing with all of this in lots of ways.
Yeah, I think it makes the job more complicated and harder to measure, right? Because you've got so many options and so many choices in how you reach consumers. So I think that's really the biggest difference, is that marketers need to know, so much more about those different areas, and we don't have a good cross media measurement approach yet, which is something that the Association of Canadian Advertisers is working on for the industry. I also think it's impacted a bit the value of the CMO with certain leaders. So because people are coming up as specialists and maybe don't have that broader business perspective, I think in some organizations that means that they're not the strategic thought partner of the CEO. And they're not that seen as much as the growth engine or driver of growth, and are rather seen as a cost center and a nice to have. So it has created some different dynamics.
Got it. And Esther, this leads so well into this next sort of conversation, which is one of the human conditions that we at Say Hi to the Future explore is find your voice. Talk to us about your journey, the current situation. So, how have you managed to stand tall amongst the very best? What lessons could marketers today take away in how they need to find their voice as they build their careers?
Sure. Well, I always wish I'd been a little taller, so I don't know how tall I'm standing, but I think for me it's really important to know yourself and what motivates you. And for me, the biggest motivator throughout my career has been about being to do interesting work where I will learn and grow and where I can work with really great people, especially if I have a chance to develop those people. It hasn't been about promotion or, the highest paycheck or any of those things. So for me, those were lesser motivators than just doing really interesting work. I also had cancer early in my career and that also drove me to make sure that I really balanced work and life and later becoming a parent that was apparent. And so what those two things have done is really said in my early career, it meant that I often took the job that no one else seemed to want. So, I started in shopper marketing before that was a well-defined discipline. Or when we had a big beauty acquisition at P&G, I put up my hand to lead it. I chose not to be the brand manager of Tide, even though that was kind of deemed the highest profile role, because I just didn't think I'd learn as much in it. From a balancing life standpoint, when I came back from my second mat leave, and I think when you and I first met, I asked to work 4 days a week, and I was reporting into the president of the P&G Canada at the time. And, that was 18 years ago. And I'm so grateful to his openness in doing that because, that was, really progressive at the time. And even my CIBC move, it really was about relaunching the CIBC brand and having that once in a career opportunity to do that in this market. And when I found that I'd felt like I'd sort of run out of runway in the marketing challenges at CIBC, I decided to rewire, and that's what I'm doing now. And so all of these things could have been seen by others as career limiters or weird choices or bad choices, but for me, they just felt like the right ones.
And so that's brilliant. So first of all, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing some of your personal life stories as well. And that's always extremely helpful for our listeners, right? Because believe it or not, lives are very much part of our work
Yeah.
regimen. So thanks for that. That's how you've managed it given the current circumstances and how the marketing function landscape is changing. What's your thought? How should other people be thinking about finding their voice and therefore standing the same way? One, obviously, you've given an insight into work on the craft and not necessarily on the promotion. The second is all around whatever's important to you. How are people going to navigate that from a career standpoint? Just a bit more perspective would be extremely helpful for our listeners.
Yeah, in terms of knowing yourself, there's obviously lots of great tools that can do that, and many people, myself included, have a panel of friends or former people they've worked with, or their kind of a team who helps them really get to know what they like and what they're good at. So, when I've left jobs, I've often asked people I've worked with like what makes me different, like what have you seen or learned from, and that helps you figure out what are the things that make you a little bit unique. So I think there's lots of online tools and other tools to be able to do that, but also just some introspection. And I think that to me is super important. I also think it's important to take some risks, right? And that probably sounds funny from somebody who's been at two big companies and, one of which I was at for over 20 years. But I always had a lens to, is this going to make me more marketable externally? And is this something where I'm going to be on the forefront of doing something different? And for me, that was really helpful in staying fresh. And even as I was leaving CIBC, I remember talking to some headhunters who were like, oh, you've been at P&G too long and you're outdated. And I just never felt that to be true, because I knew that I had invested in making sure that I was current and relevant and continually learning. So I think those are a couple of things that you can do. I mean, know yourself and know what your superpowers are, and then also just take some risks and keep trying new roles that are going to stretch you in ways that you didn't think were possible.
So true. And one of the things that, and I think you and I have had this conversation, I've had this conversation with a few people whom you and I have known very well, which is people generally think 20 years, or mine 21 for that matter at Procter, but we were looking for a job every 3 years.
Oh yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I
I
mean,
mean,
and I moved 4 different continents and geographies, and each time I was looking for a job. It just was a different assignment, happened to be with people whom I network. No different than if you're going from one organization to another, you still bank on your network and the people whom you know who can vouch for you. So I'm not so sure it wasn't one job. It
no.
was so many different assignments that I'm sure you and I both can relate to.
Yeah, I mean, and when you work with a company that's as big as Procter is, I mean, you can move geographically, you can move from categories, and I mean, running a food business versus a pharma business is very different. And so you do get that breadth of experience, and yeah, I mean, your reputation and your skills are what help you get those roles. So it is perhaps slightly easier than having to look for a job external, but certainly it is not one job for your entire time there.
It's slightly easier and it's also slightly difficult because your reputation continues.
That's true.
Um,
That's
you know,
true.
in
No,
in
there's
some
no reset.
there's no reset. In some cases, when you're moving from one company to another, some of your mistakes can be pushed under the rug. But now that you're in that same company, trust me, enough people know you. There is no hiding behind any cracks.
Yeah.
But enough about just a long career. Um, I think one of the other areas that I would love to understand from you is, like you said, you took some risks, and rightly so. You took some risks, not just like the job that nobody else wanted to have, for example, like the way you said it, but in there you explored. How did you make that choice, just knowing yourself so well and what you wanted to do? Again, just take our listeners through some bit of that so that people can also relate to and therefore start deciding on how they would be finding their voice as well.
So it's a great question. Y- I would, often talk to people who were and try to understand what success was like in that assignment, and then determine if that was one where I felt like I could add value. So, I think for me it was a lot of discussion and then a bit of a leap of faith of, is this something is there a problem here to solve that I can see myself solving? And I do think it also comes around to people. Was this a manager I wanted to work for? Was this a team I wanted to work with? Because we spend a lot of time at work, and so we want to be working with people that we are going to enjoy and that we think we can learn from, that we think we can grow with. And so for me, that was always really important as well.
CIBC brand reset. Now, boy, oh boy, that must have been, a task and a half just by itself. So what I'd love to get is your leadership take on ingenuity. And that's where the CIBC Global Brand Reset probably comes in, or you could
Yeah,
borrow from any example
yeah.
that you wish. But I'd love to get your leadership take on ingenuity, and more importantly, the human side of ingenuity as it relates to you, your organization's success. What's your take? When has it worked well? When has it not? What have you learned along the way?
So you're right. When I think of ingenuity, I do think of my time at the bank. Obviously at P&G, there was lots of ingenuity throughout. We were in Canada, we had to be scrappy and et cetera. But I do think COVID at the bank was a time where ingenuity was key. On our base plan, we had to quickly scrap all of our plans and communicate the government programs. We had to educate people how to bank digitally. We had to reassure them that their money was going to be fine, they were going to be able to keep their homes, etc. So that was, we had to be agile in our emails. I remember writing a brief on a Sunday and having the TV spot on how to bank digitally on air by the Friday. Like it was amazingly fast paced, and you just had to throw out the playbook and do it in a different way. But launching the CIBC brand was another example. We had planned to launch in May 2020 and then had to shift during COVID. And then we actually shifted 2 or 3 times. And just to give you some magnitude of the complexity of that project, there were probably about 1,000 people in the bank who were touching it in some way, shape, or form, and it impacted all 55,000 employees as well as our 6 million clients. So we did end up launching it during COVID when we weren't in the office, and I'm super proud of the team that was able to do that because it over delivered on the brand results amongst Canadians, and we did it under budget, which is kind of miraculous. But it really was the ingenuity of the many leaders. When you talk about what is it about a team that allows you to do that? I think in all those situations, what helps is a common goal. Having that task or that you're trying to, or problem that you're trying to solve. It's about making sure that everyone on the team has a voice, but yet they're also clear on their role. And of course, it also, you can have the most ingenious idea, but if you don't execute it brilliantly and you're not willing to check and adjust, then you're not going to get very far. So I think that for me is probably the best example in my career of ingenuity, and I'm sure for many in that period, because we were all in that situation of really not knowing the playbook in COVID. It was a time where you just had to really dig deep and figure out how you could operate differently.
One of the reasons why we launched the Height of the Future, and it was during COVID, was because we all were experiencing it, and we all thought this was exactly the right time to come up with, HI standing for human ingenuity, which is clever, inventive, original thinking. We came out with our values of curiosity, passion, and audacity to make a difference. I mean, all of that came about during COVID, and frankly, what we are finding out is that the whole ingenuity aspect has longevity well beyond COVID right
Oh, yeah.
now in a huge different way. Esther, I mean, you've been in so many different leadership positions. Your role with the ACA, for that matter, where you were the acting CEO and president for a little while. How about leadership? What do you look for, groom for, and nurture in people you hire and surround yourself with?
When I think of leadership, I think there's so many different leadership models, but for me, what I think about is, somebody who has a good vision, right? Somebody who can inspire others and help them rally them against that vision, include their ideas on that vision to make it better, and somebody who can drive action and impact and just make it happen. So for me, the envision, inspire, and drive are three of the main criteria that I look for in a leader. You mentioned curiosity and passion being the root of what this podcast was developed against, and to me, curiosity and passion are the key raw skills that I look for. As you know, it is really tough to coach those. I can coach somebody to make an ad. I can coach somebody to be a strong manager, to understand how to manage people. But I can't coach curiosity and I can't really coach passion either. You either have it or you don't. And I think, for me, if somebody's curious, they're going to continue to learn and grow. And that's what's going to have them be a really strong leader.
Okay, so help me with this because
Yeah.
we're all trying to figure this out, right? I'm with you. You can't coach curiosity, you cannot coach passion. How do you look for it?
I look for it in past examples, right? I look for it. So, if somebody has, been in in a volunteer role or done a summer job or done another job where you can tell that they are excited and interested. So I look for it in that way. I look for it in the questions that they ask. Are they asking me the rote questions, or are they genuinely interested in asking me something that I hadn't thought of? And I think those are areas that I look for in any interview and in any interaction. Are they genuinely interested in me or in the role that I'm looking for or in the company that I'm searching for? Or does it feel a little bit mechanical or inauthentic? And I think that's, for me, what comes through. And as much as you can't coach it, I think you can create environments where people can thrive, where people can demonstrate it, and where people can test their way into it. I mean, similar to you, Saquib, I'm sure at the dinner table, there's lots of discussion and debate with your kids about different things. And for me, that's an environment where you can encourage your kids to be curious, whether it's talking about different political parties and different points of view and how do you look at things from different sides, or whether it's to stand firm on their perspective. I mean, all those things are ways to create an environment where those skills can be nurtured.
Because if you so the reason why we're all trying to work through this is, one, you really can ask the question, tell me about a time when you were curious. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
that just doesn't work,
No.
um, from our behavioral questions the way we would ask them. The other thing is, to me, curiosity and passion at times can be at the other ends of the spectrum, right? As you try and you're in the exploring mode, are you committing and being passionate about it? And if you're being committed and being passionate about it, then are you being curious enough? Like, it's almost like something that one has to look at. And these are all different conversations, by the way, we're having with our clients, we're having with different people that I bring on the podcast. So it's fascinating. I'm with you. You can't coach it. You can look for it,
Yeah.
and you can create the environment, but also how do you sustain it over a period of time? Any thoughts would be great.
So it's interesting. I actually don't see them as different ends of the spectrum, because I think if you have passion for something, then that's going to actually fuel your curiosity even more,
Mm-hmm.
because you're not in a stagnant state. You're like, well, what more can I learn? What more can I do? What more? And I think those things drive curiosity as well. So for me, they are they are together, part and parcel together, versus being opposite ends of a spectrum. I forgot your question.
No, it's just as we are having this, we're all dealing with it,
Yeah.
right? What are some of the ways in which you're dealing with it? You said a few, but is there anything else that's on your mind that you would like to share?
To be able to identify it.
To be able to identify it and also to create the right environment.
So in terms of the identification, yes, you can't ask somebody, tell me about a time when you were curious. But if you ask them about, tell me about a time when you worked with a team and had a certain situation, and then, ask them, what do you wish you'd done differently? What do you wish you tried? Like, all those things are demonstrations of curiosity. To me, it's the probing question after, it's not the first answer. Because I think those, what else didn't you think of that you thought of now, right? If you were, all those sort of retrospective things, like, I think can help identify if somebody is curious. In terms of creating the environment, it is tougher these days because particularly as a marketer, as marketing budgets shrink and as there's more pressure for short-term quarter by quarter earnings, I think some of the curiosity, the idea of trying something small and taking some risk and being okay with failure, has been pulled out of our discipline, and I think that's unfortunate. And there's a real opportunity to I had an agency that I worked with who used to call it, go then grow, right? Like just try something and then grow it. And I think that hopefully over time, as the economic situation is improving, we'll see more of that where you can try something, and if it doesn't work, learn from that and then try and apply that learning in a different way.
Got it. I think we've beaten this one. All right. Advice to other leaders?
So what we've talked about today, a lot of what we've talked about is, for me, what's really important is to know yourself and know what's going to make your career fun. So that would be one piece of advice. And then the second is invest in your talent. Great people are what's going to make the difference. And the more you surround yourself with people smarter than yourself, the more you're going to achieve as a leader. So, those would probably be my two biggest pieces of advice. Don't take yourself too seriously and work with amazing people.
Let me let you have the last word, where we got into this, and obviously there was a certain way in which I was asking questions and you were giving me a response, and you played along beautifully, so thank you. Was there anything that you came into this with a thought that you said, I want to share this with the audience, and I just, because my questions we never got to?
I guess what one question that I would have is, what are you seeing through the discussions you're having with leaders as some of the barriers to curiosity and to growth? Like what are you hearing from other leaders on that?
Well, the sort of conversations we're having, Esther, I think a lot, and this is, by the way, getting also shown up in a lot of the conversations that are happening in Canada, especially, but it's happening everywhere. Um, and that is this whole uh, pressure on productivity, right? And so resilience comes at an investment. It comes at a cost. And when you try and cut yourself down to the bare bone to be that productive, you lose that specific area, that muscle, that extra bit of oil in the system that'll keep the machines running in different ways. And frankly, when wheels grind up, you can also change that, right? So one of the um, sort of, call it yin and yangs, that are happening right now is around the fact that if you want me to be more resilient, well, how do
Hmm.
I let go of productivity? If you want me to be more productive, then how do I build in resilience? And that's the bit of a friction that's happening. And honestly, it's a wicked challenge, right? It's
Yeah.
it's just it's one of those things that will continue. And I'm not suggesting it's a solve, but one of the areas that people are banking on is technology.
Right.
So technology could be the massive unlock that is going to help you become more productive, while also investing in the people and your talent in order to make them learn and explore and do all of that. That's one of the things that we're seeing. I don't know what's your take on that.
Well, are you seeing it on technology or things like AI as well? Like when you say
to me
technology.
to me AI is part of that technology stuff
Yeah.
that we're talking about. In a lot of cases, what we are finding out is that CEOs, for example, are saying the next person who says to me that do something on AI, I'm going to whack them. Simply because, I mean, I need to show return on that investment. So on the one hand, my board or the broader marketplace is asking me to get into AI. I don't see the return on that investment yet. And so how do I stay productive while invest in that? That's exactly the sort of friction that we're talking about. So yeah, that's all there.
I actually think you don't have to invest hugely in AI to make it a useful tool. What I worry about is that it'll stop people from thinking and they'll become over reliant on it, right? And that they'll use it instead of, if you use it as a jump start to something, it can be great. But if you just accept it as the truth and don't challenge and say, oh, could I make this better? Or, how do I improve on this? I think that's the problem. I mean, I certainly there's a lot of non-value work that tech and AI help eliminate so that we can do the value added work of thinking and growing and the stuff that I mean, I'm gonna ramble a little, but if I go back to an example, AI would never have invented Febreze or Swiffer or any of those products, right? Because they were unarticulated needs, right? And it's really somebody who was able to observe consumers' behavior and identify something they hadn't even thought of. So, I think that AI is an incredible tool. I use it personally all the time, but it doesn't eliminate the need for human ingenuity and creativity and observation and curiosity and all those good things that I think businesses need moving forward. So, that's my view.
You're preaching to the choir. And
Yeah.
frankly, if you were to come and join us on September 26th, that day is all about better thinkings translating to better outcomes.
Yeah.
So it'd be great. Esther, this has been fun. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure our listeners would like to hear more from you. We'll tag you in our show notes. But thanks a lot.
Thank you. I really appreciate being invited.